Welcome to this parallel event called Financing with Dignity, Aligning Capital and Values to Gender Justice. And it's a real joy to have you all with us. Anyone at this time, you're more than welcome to join us over here if you think you can being here better. So I'd like to begin, as we do in my home country of Australia, with an acknowledgement of the country. And this is where I acknowledge the traditional custodians and First Nations people of all the countries from which we come. So here on Turtle Island, so the United States, I pay my respect to the traditional custodians, and particularly here in New York City, the Ngāti people. And I also want to acknowledge elders past, present, and of course emerging. So I acknowledge that our traditional custodians and First Nations people have always been guardians of our communities and our planet, and have always looked after the waters, the earth, and the skies with love and compassion, and particularly the wind. So I acknowledge any First Nations people who are joining us today in this room. A couple of housekeeping notes before we begin. Can everyone hear me? And everyone think it's ready? Fabulous, thank you. If you need to use the bathrooms during the event, please feel free. They are in the basement, in the basement. But I advise you to stay on the way to the lift because you could be confusing with 100 other people going up and down the floors. But it is truly a delight to be here with you all today. We are of course gathering as kind of the 68th Commission on the Status of Women. My name is Jemima Welsh, and I am a member of the University Global Action Team, which actually works here in this building in New York. For those who don't know, this is the Tillman Chapel of the Church Centre of the United Nations, and is often used as a gathering space for non-governmental and faith-based organisations. So I'd like to extend a big thank you to our host, United Women in Faith, and NGOs Theatre New York. This particular event is run by Mercy Global Action, which is the global justice arm of Mercy International Association, or we like to call it MIA. MIA is an organisation of the leaders of Mercy congregations, institutes, and federations throughout the world, which were founded to serve the Sisters of Mercy, as well as their associates and partners in the industry. The Sisters of Mercy have long recognised the transformative impact of financing from a gender perspective. Their foundress, Catherine McCauley, demonstrated this foresight when she used her substantial inheritance to establish the first House of Mercy in Melbourne in 1827, a shelter that aimed to uplift women in poverty, living on the streets, through education and skills training. Catherine's pragmatic approach focused on dignity rather than charity, and that is, of course, something that we would really like to highlight in our event today. It was quite radical for the 1800s. This approach reflected a firm belief that poverty is not a fate, but a structural condition that can be alleviated through investments in women's financial literacy and inclusion. And this foundation has continued to guide almost 200 years of service the work by the Sisters of Mercy throughout the world. So in light of this background, today we will delve into the ways in which capital can be used to support and build the livelihoods of women and girls living in poverty. In other words, to do mercy. As we know, the theme of this year's commission is celebrating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with the gender perspective. We've decided to approach this topic from a faith-based perspective. We'd like to explore how our faith guides us in our financial decisions, and specifically how it compels us to work towards gender equality from a position of shared dignity. Now, I must just say that we are speaking primarily today from a position of being within the Catholic Christian faith. But I'm hoping that our conversations will be as relevant to many of you in other religious faiths as well. The event will run for a total of 90 minutes. For the first 45 minutes, we'll hear from each of our 4 expert guest speakers on the topic. Then we'll open up the discussion for Q&A, and you're welcome to ask any questions that arise from what you've heard today or in your own learning. We intend to keep this event accessible and open to everyone, not just those working in the investment field. So you'll be pleased to hear that we won't be using a lot of investment jargon, but please do feel comfortable to ask questions. Importantly, each of you should have been given a business card, and when you first entered the room. So this card has on the front of it a QR code, which will take you to a web page for the event. And that web page has the full bios for each of our 4 guest speakers, as well as the key definitions in relation to the field. So if something doesn't quite make sense, maybe have a check at that web page and see if we've covered the definition there. It'll also have some additional reading resources if you're interested in exploring the topic further. But without further ado, I'll move on to the real reason why we're here, and that is to hear from our 4 wonderful guest speakers. And they've all travelled a great distance to be with us today, so we are just thrilled beyond measure to have them here. Immediately to my left here, we have Sister Marilyn, who is a sister of Mercy and the founder and executive director of Mercy Beyond Borders, which works with women and girls living in extreme poverty in South Sudan, Haiti, Uganda, Kenya, and Malawi. And a very cool fact that I learned about Marilyn is that in 2001, she was personally honoured by the Dalai Lama as an unsung hero of compassion. So I'm embarrassed, but I think that's right. And next to her we have Elizabeth Gallo, who is a co-founder of the Francesco Collaborative, which gathers Catholic investors and global associates to practice the prophetic edge of Catholic investment. Elizabeth has worked with social entrepreneurs around the world, as well as many women's religious congregations. She is incredibly qualified with degrees from Kalamazoo College and Princeton University, and an honorary doctorate by the Dominican School of Philosophy and Theology. Then we have Bryan, who's the president of Mercy Investment Services, the asset management program for the Sisters of Mercy in the Americas and its ministries. This huge role involves working for systemic change in the areas of non-violence, racism, environment, concern for women, and immigration. Bryan is a chartered financial analyst, so he readily understands the growing area of socially responsible investment. And last but in no way least is Kira Feely, who is head of fundraising and communications for Visa, an Irish NGO developing next generation models of development, particularly focused on the health, welfare, and happiness of women and families in East Africa. Kira is also on the board of the Samaritan Islands, a national charity offering 24/7 emotional support to anyone in distress. So please join me in welcoming our very esteemed panel. So Marilyn, my first question is for you today. In founding and leading Mercy Beyond Borders, you work with partners across the globe to create pathways for women and girls living in extreme poverty to learn, connect, and lead. In essence, to live lives full of opportunity and fulfillment. What role has capital, money, played in fueling this mission? What are your learnings about how access to adequate capital helps women and girls to thrive? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll begin with a 1-minute video. You might not understand words if you don't speak to post them. Don't worry about it.
Then I want to bring up a
So did you notice the one person in that video that had no voice? The 12-year-old girl, right? Okay. Watch it one more time and I'll talk over it. This is a typical South Sudanese village, one of the places where University Beyond Borders works. And a short walk away from this village is the school that we support, the only all-girls school, primary school in South Sudan. It has 800 girls. It's the only place where girls are safe. What's this negotiation about? Forced marriage. The brothers and uncles of the girl are negotiating, and who do you think is the intended husband? Which of them? That guy. The old one. This is typical and tragic. So what could change in this culture if women had more cash? Well, it's going to be a long journey, but we already see it changing. Because when women get cash, as they do in our micro enterprise program and in our scholarship program, and stipends, they have choices. They have voice for the first time, and they have agency. They can do things. They can decide to send their daughters to school. They can decide what kind of business to get into. And the men are not particularly in favor of this. We are really pushing the envelope, but after 15 years of doing it, we're seeing it change. We're really seeing it change. And I'll just tell you one story. I was at a meeting of NGOs in a Ugandan refugee center. There are 21 refugee camps in the northern part of Uganda. 83% of the 1.2 million refugees there are women and children. But all the camp leaders, you guessed it, are men. And there's one Uber leader who's over the 21 men leaders. And after we presented about the work University Beyond Borders was doing with Sudanese women, the Uber leader, about 6'10", in the air, stood up and berated me in public for a good 3 or 4 minutes, saying, "You are doing a terrible thing, University Beyond Borders. You are giving money to our women who should never do this. Because if they have money, they will become independent and they will divorce us." Duh.
It's an incredibly sobering reality, Marilyn, just the connection between money and power, and how that plays out in many places in the world. Elizabeth, I'd now like to come to you. So traditionally speaking, faith and capital are seen at odds with each other. I think there's been an assumption that you can't be a person of faith and still be concerned with money. Because money holds the stigma of being dirty or incompatible with the life of servant to others and to God. But many people are challenging this idea, and particularly you. So as co-founder of the Francesco Collaborative, can you tell us more about both fronts of the economy and Francesco movement, and share some of your learnings in working with various religious congregations around the world on aligning their financial investments with Catholic social teaching?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see such a beautiful group gathered here. So Jemima mentioned the economy of Francesco. In 2019, Pope Francis wrote a letter to you, to everyone around the world. And in that letter, he said, we need to give a soul to the economy. The economy is about us, it's here to serve us. We are not here to serve it. And after about a decade of working in the impact investing field, so I was working in microfinancing, I was working in venture investing, trying to invest resources in people who are starting social impact ventures, I realized that in my work to do that in ways that unlocked opportunity for women, I was often making the argument about how that was good for the economy. Oh, if we invest more in women, we can increase GDP by X factor. And I started to feel a little icky about that, if I'm honest, because I realized I wanted to flip it. I wanted the economy to serve women. I wanted the way we design our financing to serve women. And for me, that meant rethinking how we design capital markets, how we design these financing mechanisms. And the place where I found a tremendous amount of inspiration was with women's religious congregations. So here in the United States, for those who don't know, in the 1970s, they spearheaded an entire new movement of financing in what we call community development finance, pulling together the resources and saying, these resources need to align with our values, and these resources need to be doing something that's really at the service of building a more just economy, addressing those structural problems of poverty that you were describing. And so it takes courage, because in many ways the conventional logic would have told them, not a smart investment, too risky, you might lose your money, right? But the faith and the conviction and the courage to say, no, we believe something different and we're about something different, catalyze an entire movement of finance in this country. So we really stand on the shoulders of sisters here in the U.S. impact investing landscape. So I'm continuing to accompany and work with sisters as they discern and discover. I mean, like, you have a phenomenal leader here in Bryan, his colleague Katie, and others at the university who are discerning how to continue deepening that legacy. How do we rethink what really is risk? You know, when we talk about, risk-adjusted returns. Well, in many markets, it's a bit of a fallacy. And there are many ways to understand risk. There's the risk of not having a livable future, a livable planet, the risk of not having access to good and consistent work. And so I think the more we take into account a holistic understanding of risk and how our faith convictions can really ground us in different kinds of questions, like what is enough of a financial return rather than having the most financial return, then we will start to make strides toward rethinking how we structure our companies.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It makes me think very strongly about our definitions of success, and success in financing and success around money. And we've traditionally always thought about it in terms of a quantitative measure. You know, how much can we make? What is the ultimate amount that we can make? But we fail to see what actually we're doing with that money. Money is indeed a means to an end. Thank you very much. It's great to hear from you. Kira, I'll speak. Sorry, Bryan, I will come back. But Kira, I would like to hear from you next. And you work for Pini, an Irish development partner that focuses on improving the health, welfare, and happiness of women and their families in East Africa. Your programs are dedicated to not only mitigating climate change, but also ensuring that women, communities, and families are equipped with skills, training, and resources that they need to thrive. So what makes your approach and financing models so radical? How do you know what truly works, and how do you keep track of your needs?
Thank you, Jemima. Hello, everybody. It's really lovely to be here. I'm going to take one question at a time here. So, what is our approach and financing? How is it radical? Well, we're innovators in VT. You may never have heard of us. We're a small Irish NGO working in East Africa. We're very, very innovative in our thinking. So, number one, we're innovative in the way we do development. We have a very highly evolved, community-led methodology. And really what this means is we engage with communities at a very early stage. They identify themselves what their own personal needs work we do, highly scalable and very cost effective. So that's one innovation. The second innovation would be our impact investment fund. It's called the PTB Impact Fund. Bryan knows all about it. And it's very, I just have to very quickly explain to you how the fund works so that you know what I'm talking about. Our focus in Pini has always been on empowering women and relieving them from the burden of women and girls. So a lot of that burden comes from planting wood. And planting wood day in and out to feed their highly inefficient cook stoves and to boil their water. If they have access to clean water for that eliminates an awful lot of that too. If they have improved cook stoves, that eliminates an awful lot of that too. That gives them different time back. For women, that time can be used generating an income. For girls, that time can be used going back to school. So the impact investment fund works like this. When you reduce all of that wood burning, it saves an awful lot of carbon being emitted into the atmosphere. You're not burning nearly as much wood. That carbon can be counted, believe it or not, and measured with carbon emission savings. And that's what we do. We count or measure the amount of carbon that has been saved. So say, for instance, last year a woman and her family, on the old traditional cook stove, used 5 tons of carbon. With the new cook stove and not having to boil water, that's then reduced to about 2 tons of carbon emissions. So that saving all of that means that we can sell that carbon savings. It's a bit complicated, but we sell them at carbon offset, or sometimes they're called carbon credits. And that's how the finance works. Investors give us money. We work, pay back the investors with the profits of selling those carbon offsets. And then there's the third innovation. The residual profits are circled back into the community to do all the living in the first place. So really that means that, it's a very unique approach. And so you've asked me very quickly, and I'm going to answer very quickly, how do we know it works? Because we did a pilot in 2015, we proved that it didn't work. And in fact, we have 80 people in Ethiopia in constant daily dialogue with the communities we work with, but we also chat because we collaborate very closely with networks, local networks, and they feed all of that back to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kira. It's amazing the various intersecting ways that we were affected by it. And you speak very clearly from the from the climate perspective there, solutions that are applied are beneficial to the climate and to the environment, which you can underneath, but also to the women themselves. So solutions don't have to be at the expense of one thing over another, they can be holistically beneficial. Bryan, I'd like to come to you now. So you come from a somewhat similar perspective, but you sit on the investment side of this topic. As President of Mercy Investment Services, you oversee substantial funds under management. We know that one of the biggest challenges for people working in investment in the current climate is balancing the need to secure market rate or above market returns for stakeholders, while investing in socially and environmentally responsible or indeed impactful ways that uphold the rights of people and the earth. So how do you and your team navigate this challenge? What principles or values do you fall back on when faced with difficult investment decisions?
Thank you, and thank you to folks here for inviting us and share a little bit about what we do. Before we kind of answer that question, I want to take a little bit of step back. If you stop and think about any organization, that's basically three resources. You've got the people that work for the organization, and you've got any sort of property that you're having the services being provided by. Hopefully, we have a little bit of investments that you can help to substantiate that and help turn some lines of how to keep those people. You stop and think about what activities do you go through the entire, looking for just the right person. You want somebody with integrity, passion, justice, trying to help other people. Look at our facilities, and there is no empty space. Every spot that you can add, you help serve, you help somebody. But I sit on investments that, for the most part, you throw those same values out the door, and you say, "Oh, we have to maximize." And the argument the sisters have made is, well, shouldn't we be applying those same objectives to some organizations' basis? It's the largest asset on the balance sheet. It is the biggest asset. Why is it that we're trying to maximize our return so that whatever we spend every day we support mission? But while it's sitting there investing, earning, growing, it's not supporting the mission. And so from our perspective, it's really trying to look at our investments just like we look and say, we should be applying the same values, but we should be attacking the same issues, the same critical concerns. And on the next slide, from our perspective, I talk a little bit about how it's a very comprehensive approach that we have with Sisters of Mercy. We do not recommend anyone try to jump off and do all this all at once. Say, find out what your gifts are and start in little pieces. There are a lot of ways that you can use your investments to try to support the mission of your organization. Everyone has different resources and such, but all of those methods should be being applied to those concerns that you have as an organization. So in this case, it's the critical concerns of the Sisters of Mercy, which includes women. And so from our perspective, as we'll talk about here, is what we're trying to accomplish there. Getting to the answer, as I wanted, the last really gets into this concept that we have to redefine what our expectations are from a return perspective. And at this point, return is always meant is this risk return mechanism. We argue that no, return is financial return and impact. It is what you're accomplishing from a mission perspective. And there are parts of your portfolio that you can look at and say, okay, we'll do a little bit more return there, we'll do this and that. Here, a lot of impact here and over here. So look at it from an overall perspective. Apply those values that you can use in the organization to look at it and say, it's a lot of art, not science. It's looking at it and saying, okay, I think we can eke out a little bit more mission, whether those things are green funds or whether they invest in these examples we talk about there. Whether that be through the private equity or invested in solar, all of those different areas that you have to look at a holistic perspective and say, how do we take the values that we put on a day-to-day basis in our lives and the people we serve and say, why not apply it to a financial capacity?
I think that's a really powerful point, Bryan. It's looking at the multiple meanings of return and having the integrity to be consistent with the values that we uphold in our businesses, not just with our people, but the work that we're doing and also the way that we treat our assets, our finance. And I think this sort of focus on value is very familiar to you, Elizabeth. So I want to sort of ask you a personal question. Why do you believe people with faith are in a special position to make a difference on gender equality with their money? What are some of the big challenges that you face in your work, and what sustains you in your mission? Wow, 3 minutes. So, I'm a product of training in neoclassical economics and financing, even in the impact space. And in some ways, I've had to unlearn a lot of things in the last 5 years in particular. And for me, what's guided that journey of my unknowing is my faith and my sense of belonging to community, a community of people who are also seeking and also searching to do things differently. And I think part of this is, you know, the what that we're doing, it's a lot about the how we're going about it. And it's worldview building, it's culture shifting work. The Pope Francis says, we are not going to address the ecological crisis we have today unless we change our heart, change our mind. That begins with us. And so for me, a lot of what we do in our Catholic Impact Investing community is we build cohorts of people who can journey together. They learn together and they unlearn together. And ideally they collaborate in very practical ways, like with VITA, and I share. So we had a community of investors who were so interested in what VITA Impact Fund is doing, in part because VITA had the courage to say, for equity investors, we're actually going to take a bold step and cap return at a certain level, and anything beyond that is redistributed in the community. So that's a structural change. It is very different from a common equity investment where you are maximizing returns for your shareholders in that deal. So the fact that a community of people came together to learn and make that investment collectively, that's a part of being to me, that's a big part of what faith and spirituality can lend to animating a new practice of finance. And I see examples like this of women's religious congregations all over the place. You know, there's a congregation, Dominican Sisters, you know, where I live in Michigan, that just invested in an organization called Enterprising Latinas, which is an organization serving Latino entrepreneurs who are starting micro enterprises. I know there are people here in the room who have work businesses that you started. I was just learning, just talking with a over here who started 2 enterprises in the Congo, and she is struggling to find access to financial resources that will allow her to unlock inventory growth. So there are many people who are overlooked by traditional finance. And I think faith communities, you know, to Bryan's point, haven't maybe always recognized that assets that they hold in an endowment or in their institution could be serving their mission in really powerful ways by investing in funds, investing in enterprises. One other thing I'll say is part of this unlearning, I think, is about figuring out how we can get out of this black and white model of you have a grant or you have an investment. There's a lot of room in between the two, and there's a lot of blending that we can do. It is being done, including by faith communities. So for example, there's a group of sisters, Pini sisters, who invested in the Refugee Investment Fund. The fund started, initiated by the Danish Refugee Council, that is blending grants and debt investment to make accessible really quote-unquote risk-friendly, or whatever term you want to use, friendly capital for refugees who are starting businesses. We have got to think about non-extractive financing design that will really empower women to start and grow the kinds of businesses they want to create.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Elizabeth. And I think in many ways this sector, you know, whatever you call it, financing, DBT, impact economy, impact investing, corporate social responsibility to some extent. I think it really calls us to be rebellious, to be courageous, because it requires a totally different way of thinking about the world, and way of thinking about how our world can operate. And I used to work with somebody who was sort of pioneering a lot of impact investment in Australia, and he said to me, it's not just about money. You know, if you're somebody who has been fortunate enough to make money or to have money at your disposal, particularly within very wealthy markets, you know, you don't just have money, you have contacts. You will have contacts that other people don't have. You will have knowledge that other people don't have. Use those as well as funds to help people. And when I think about this area, I think so much of our, particularly venture capital, goes to young, white men who have come from very privileged wealthy backgrounds. And so there's a familiarity in that. So that rebelliousness, that courage is really required to go, you know what, I'm going to invest in that young single mom who's starting something fresh and might not make a huge return in the first 5 years. It might fail, but what we have invested in her will have ripple impacts on her community. So I think that you speak that really beautifully, Elizabeth. Marilyn, if I can come to you now, we know that true gender equality depends on justice for women and girls across a number of different instances of the area. And we've explored that a little bit before here. So for example, health, access to markets, climate resilience, political stability and cultural norms, they all play a role. This means that it's often not enough to just fund a single program or area. We need to consider how women are impacted by a myriad of forces concurrently. So what context-specific factors influence or constrain your work with Mercy Beyond Borders? For example, how does culture or political stability affect the ways in which you're able to work with women and girls?
That's a pretty complex question. And when I was asked to be on this panel, I noticed that the other three persons are experts in finance, which of course I am not. But then I discovered that, well, maybe I'm here because I'm working in the trenches. And as you saw from that video, and I'll show you a couple more slides now, I'll run through very quickly, just to give you context, and then I'll address two of your questions, political and cultural barriers to girls and women's advancement. So, this is our mission. We're working in very tough places, very tough. So it's a long game. And it's not just success after success. So, next slide. These are the 5 countries. We're working really with 3 populations, Haitian, South Sudanese, and Malawi. All very poor countries that make it difficult for women and girls. We're in South Sudan, Uganda and Kenya only because of the refugees from South Sudan. Millions. So it all starts with her, right? These are the villages where our clients come from. And when we invest in those girls, when we manage to get them into school, when we invest in them, we see incredible change because we're pushing their education, their connection with one another, and their eventual leadership for change. This is one of our clients. She came from the village where that forced marriage video took place. She is now a nurse and midwife. These are her relatives. She's now back working in the clinic where she grew up. She's about a couple miles away from the school where she received her education. The young women we're working with, we started in kindergarten, so it's a long game, right? Are now IT technicians. 2 civil engineers in South Sudan. But before we started Mercy Beyond Borders, that year only 11 girls graduated from high school in the entire country. Now we have over 80 who are university grads. And of course, it takes 16 years. And women leaders, you would never, 10 years ago, have seen a woman leading a workshop that men were attending. You know, there's real change happening. So, learning, connecting, reading, that's what we're all about. You can see more on our website. These girls are all fugitives. They are escapees from that kind of forced marriage, which of course is a form of human trafficking. They are now, of the 800 girls in this primary school we supported in South Sudan, 10% are forced marriage escapees. They can never go home again. They're there 12 months a year. When the other students leave for vacation, they stay. We have guarded the gate with an AK-47. We had one girl come at age 15, begging to get into the school. Of course, we let her in. She had been married and widowed 4 times before the age of 14, so that her father could get the cattle down time after time. Why did they die? Because they were so old. And she was very old. This is the situation we're looking at. And this is why we are investing, not in building buildings, but investing in girls and women. We also have separate project and everything next to women, but we are beginning to see the change that happens. When you invest in women, and there's no brain drain, they may get their university education in Uganda or Kenya where the schools are better. They go back to South Sudan. I find that phenomenal. Okay, so culturally, what stops girls from getting educated? How long do I have? Okay. First of all, they can hardly enroll in school. Right? Parents don't invest in it because they don't believe it's important. Poverty stops. Culture stops. Even if they get in school, they're likely to be pulled out in the 6th grade when they reach puberty because of no hygiene products or because mostly forced marriage. Can they study if they're in school? Not if they're in a mixed gender school. Because the boys will ridicule them, and because the girls have to do all the chores after school, so they can't study. And it's unsafe in most South Sudanese schools because the men are teachers are men, right? And once in a workshop, a colleague of mine was explaining gender-based violence to this room full of men teachers, and one of the guys raised his hand and said, "What are you talking about? This is why we become teachers, so we have our choice in the most beautiful girls." The rape by teachers is very common. Pregnancies in school are very common. There's so many cultural barriers to girls reaching the point where we finally begin to see they can overcome them. The basic point I want to make is you, me, all of us, we can never change these cultures from the outside. Never. Even if we try hard not to be colonial, right? But when we educate the women, they are going to make these changes. You see it happening. Education gives them not just knowledge, it gives them power, voice, agency, and status in their communities. I'll tell you a story you asked me about status in the community. Like political instability, second thing I said, trauma in times of war and conflict disproportionately affects females. Now, you might think it affects men because they're out fighting, but it affects the women because they have to hold their families together. They can't run into the bush quickly when they're carrying a newborn or caring for grandma. They are at risk of rape, of loss, everything. Then they end up, if they're lucky, in a refugee camp. And by then, again, controlling it. And then the schools shut down. As you see now in Haiti, where we have over 100 girls in school, and the professors are being taken to a medical school, or just, it's terrible what's happening. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. You feeling like this? Yeah, me too sometimes. But everybody can do something. We have great examples here from the other panelists. And I would just say systemic change, advocacy, investment, but also donations. Education takes money. It takes a lot of money. And the girls are not going to be able to pay it back, but they can pay it forward. And that's one of the values that we teach everyone, that they're already volunteering in their communities. So I will end with this quote from, it comes from the Islamic tradition, the Sufi branch. I think it's the best description of Eucharist I've ever heard. This is from 800 years ago. Be the one who, when you walk into a room, blessings shift to the one who needs it most. Even if you've not been fed, be bread. So I think that's our shared prayer. We can all learn to be bread for one another. And I'll end with something that Justice Sotomayor from the Supreme Court said. He said, you know, real change is made in dirt, not sky.
Shows how important it is to be in the trenches. We're very glad you're here, Marilyn. Thank you. Kira, if I can ask you about your experience. So VITA works with a number of other organisations to achieve its mission, including the Irish government through Irish Aid and the Irish Embassy in Ethiopia and Eritrea, the European Union, philanthropic organisations, religious community, the Irish agri-food sector, public donation, and private individuals. So come on then, it takes a village. What do you think are the benefits and challenges of collaborating with others, particularly the government?
Thank you. Well, there are benefits and challenges. We engage with governments, two different types of government, if you like. We engage with governments in the global north. They're funding partners. They're very important for those reasons, but also they give us great credibility. They usually have very stringent policies around who they fund, and once you become a funding partner, that enhances your reputation. So it can be very useful for us. And on top of that, they are usually the drivers of policy. So they tend to make us better at what they do. They push on policy like whistleblower safeguarding. They push on good governance. So they can be a really excellent partner. The downside of that is they drive policy. And if you are a very small organization, that can be very onerous. They can also be subject to how to tweaking, So if someone's in favor, great. If they fall out of favor, you might find your funding partner, running in the other direction. If the host country you're in is not popular, it's very example. So that we also engage with local governments in our host countries. That's an incredibly important relationship for us to have. These, it's no longer appropriate to work in countries without engaging with government, but our governments, our host country governments, they get to leverage their knowledge, their experience, their understanding, their cultural understanding. Say, I'll give you an example. We fix commercial points. Now, I must state, all of our staff in Ethiopia, there's 18 in Ethiopia, 15 in Eritrea, they're all local. We don't have an expatriate staff, but we don't have a huge staff either. So we have to be highly collaborative. We don't know every village in Ethiopia or the regions where we work, where there is a broken water point that the government does, and we can access that information. They also have wonderful engineers. They have, they have equipment oftentimes that we need to use. So that collaboration is really important. And we also collaborate very closely with them on our other programs, such as our agricultural programs, where we work very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture in both countries. The downside of that is political upheaval. Ethiopia's gone through a very hard time in the last 3 years. They have fallen out of favor with some Western governments. They've also been a bit more difficult to work with in terms of the NGO landscape. So that has put us under a little bit of pressure. So that there can be difficulties working with the host government as well. Their priorities can often change as well. So we're happy to be highly collaborative. We're very small, as I say. So we do work very closely with, we can't be in every village, as I said. We're only 80 people. We work closely with farming networks. We work very closely with women's networks. And that puts us in every single village, every single day. So, you have to be collaborative and you have to leverage what you've got. And what you've got is relationships. So, also, I just, on that basis, it's really important to have close alignment on values, if at all possible, with any of the partners, whether they are the local partners that you just referenced, or whether they are our investors, our grantees, any of the networks that we work with. The value alignment is critical to our success. And for instance, nothing said, when we work with women we set up co-ops so that they can they can build their own stores and then sell those stores and supply those stores to their local villages. So that's part of our store program. And that provides decent jobs in the community. But remember when I said that we build capacity with our partner communities so that they resolve their own problems. Nothing says solidarity than when people are backed, to resolve their own problems, when they drive their own, development. Nothing says, when you honor someone's human dignity by investing in them, when you show them solidarity by investing in them, those are our values. Listen, you know more about the Catholic social teaching, and those values help us to define who our partners are. We work very closely with Mercy Investment Services. They share the same values with us. They help us to build this incredible impact investment fund that we have because of these shared values.
It's wonderful, Kira. I think you've touched on a key point there around the importance of relationships. And I think sometimes in this space, there is the perception that investors or philanthropists or people who are giving money occupy a sort of more powerful position of people receiving the funding. But actually, it's about building that trust, because without people receiving the funding, doing the work on the ground, you're not going to change. So you're learning together. It's a pathway together. And I think you highlighted that. Thank you. And Bryan, I'd like to hear another grassroots example from you. So you have 5 critical concerns or thematic priorities that inform your investment mandate, Mercy Investment Services. And one of these is, of course, women. So Mercy Investment Services aims to work for equality of women, celebrating their contributions, advocating for their rights, and speaking out against gender discrimination in the church and society. Can you tell us, Bryan, about a program or initiative at Mercy Investment Services that currently supports, that you currently support, that really highlights this focus on gender?
Difficult thing when asked this question is how we narrow it down. We have a program called Mercy Partnership. It's basically essentially tools that you use. This is the high impact concessionary encouragement work, whether you're willing to take a lesser return because of all wonderful things being done, particularly as it relates to social and environmental addressing economic poverty, politics, and education, particularly regarding women, children, immigrants, refugees, and people of color. So that is the purpose here. Unlike some of the other colleagues on this panel, we are not on the ground. We are looking for those partners who are on the ground that we can leverage, because we can't do all this work. This is a significant amount of work that's being done. We can provide the capital. We can provide capital networks. So we have 65 different organizations that we support. They're located in various middle small business states and over 70 countries. One of the things that we're always looking for in regards to this decision-making components to make sure that folks running these organizations are aligned with interests. One of that is board of directors. For the most part, we aggregate all these 60 organizations. About half of the board of directors should be, and that is important to us from that standpoint. And at the end of the day, benefit about 63 million people across all of these organizations. On the next slide, one of the we do with an example. So Bryan, let's what exactly it's again, it's not what we're doing. So we're providing capital to wonderful groups on doing good work. And one of these is Friendship Bridge. And when we really look at what they can do from transformation impact of financing. So it's an organization created in 1990. They create opportunities for women, principally From our standpoint, they help about 30,000 a year, mostly in rural areas as well. When you stop and think about this, again, as mentioned earlier, what could a $100 loan do for an individual to be able to purchase or buy, purchase inventory? That's something you want to realize. Well, in rural quad, first of all, what if you have a bank? If you have a bank close by, who wants to hand on to the individual with no further history, no collateral? From the standpoint of the loans in the are likely all financial transactions are done scanned, and you're dealing with 22 indigenous communities in rural areas. So women have a disadvantage in terms of trying to garner access to that capital. As we'll see in the video on the next page, really it's trying to provide an infrastructure for women to basically take the power of their own hands, create business, and support the growing resilience in that regard. And so, Friendship Bridge, we'll flip to the next page and go ahead and show
Thì đầu tiên ai cũng được cô lại được thế cũng biết là được cô lại
Eres empoderada de ti mismo, eres
empoderadas elimina la pobreza.
So would you like to speak to Friendship Bridge a bit more?
No, I mean, from our standpoint, that as you listen to the video, and then it's out of some conventions, just Google Friendship Bridge, but a wide variety of areas. And in addition to providing the loans, it's providing education. It's helping people understand what it is that they're doing. It is also providing health services, so women can make better decisions because they're taking care of themselves. You know, most mothers will put everyone else's needs before their own affairs. When COVID hit, because of the use of electronic devices and access to electronic devices, essentially was a huge way to communicate the participants, let them know how blissful that they need to do, what are the ways to address it, to talk about the benefits of vaccines, and to educate from that standpoint. So it's more than just providing the capital, it is being there as a educator, as someone who can be a sounding board and bring groups of women together so that they can share amongst themselves their experiences, their learnings, their practice, and the wide variety of leaders in retail, using arts and see, you know, how do you make products and how do you lay it out to get on Facebook Marketplace and feel the stuff of globally. So a wide variety of areas, a wonderful organization, we really start to think about the types of individuals who locked down the financial capital structure, because of where they were going, when they were on, and what the rules and financial infrastructure was like on. It gives them a bit of having issues.
Beautiful, those images that bring it all to life. And I want to also extend a special thank you to our tech experts who have been definitely included. I'm so glad I don't have that job. But thank you so much to all of you for sharing these tangible examples that you all share and your work and your passion. Really ground the topic in reality in the trenches, because these are people's lives and livelihoods with some. It's not, as I said, money is the means to end. This is very tangible end. So money is essential for equality, but it's also just a way of getting to the absolute goal, which is health, welfare, and happiness of women and girls everywhere. So I now would like to take this opportunity to open up to the audience for Q&A. We've been so fortunate to hear from our speakers on their experiences, and I'm sure there are many thoughts floating around your heads. So we really do encourage your questions, and whether to a specific speaker or to the panel at large. I think what I'll do is just raise your hand. I'll take 2 questions at a time, and then if it's a general question, any of the speakers can speak to that question. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes. Hopefully we have hands. And colleagues having done with the mic,
So I have to student. So my name is Miaka Dawala. I'm from Liberia. I'm the executive director of Super in Liberia. And the conversation around for me, I want to understand your approach to ensure that the resources are utilized on ground in an equitable and accountable manner. I'm from a civil society organization, and most of the time we struggle with sustainability of our resources, but also sustainability of our information. Because the INGOs that are on ground, they withdraw at their time, at their will. So what do you do as funders to ensure that the local partners on ground are funded and our initiatives are supported? And I will finalize by saying, as we human rights defenders, we are the ones who are identifying with the real issue. We use our voices, we use our identity. When it comes to the most critical issues, sometimes it is not the NGOs that are identifying with this issue, it's us. And the lack of access and the lack of resources for a challenge to even our well-being. I lost my home and my house got burned. There's no police investigation, there's no fire service intervention, and up to now, I still live in fear because of the work I do. Because we are identifying with the most critical issues that we can assist with. But we have no source of support in terms of protection, in terms of support of our source. So when we find defenders what the intervention and support to work our system, and what is the strategy to ensure that women who are in the front line are given access to funding and opportunity in terms of women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take one more question, just so we have 2. But I have written down the notes, so we won't forget. My name is Rachel Wolf. I'm a representative of the Panelists in the United States. We're big, for those who don't know. One of the things we've been focusing on this CSW is how do we make our institutions a little more flexible and gender-focused? So we talked a lot today about, how do we empower women, but what are the basically, from that flip side, these have these institutions that are so ingrained and so entrenched. And so what are we, how do we use this, our investment capital and the things that we've been talking about to help create these with more flexible and responsive institutions. Thank you very much for those questions. So we had Rachel, was it? Speaking about, so how to make organizations and institutions more flexible and gender focused and responsive. And then was it Nika at the back? Have I got that correct? Was your name Nika, sorry?
My name is Miyaka.
Miyaka. So Miyaka was talking about the importance of sustaining genuine partnerships on the ground with local partners amidst crisis or amidst when other people are pulling out and leaving communities vulnerable. How do you sustain really strong partnerships on the ground, particularly with women? So I will pass it around to whoever would like to address those questions.
Thank you so much for your questions, Eva and Rachel. I need to just very quickly, I'm standing because you're so far away. As regards, I think it's very important, I mentioned earlier that we don't have an expatriate staff, and that's a critical factor. You know, our teams, I don't speak of Asia's experience, our teams are local, so they're less likely to run away when trouble arrives. One of the things you did mention, which is really important, was the sustainability of projects. We have a history in Africa, certainly, of failed development, you know, because people go into villages and they build a water point or fix something or do something and move on to the next village, and that just doesn't work. We need to accept now that doesn't work. And making it sustainable means empowering the local communities to own their own development. So that it's not, it has less and less and less to do with the NGO, more and more and more to do with the communities driving their own development, owning their own water points. So I think that's a really good, important point that you made, Rachel, in terms of what you said about the investment. How do you make, you know, how do you make investors more open to impact investment? It's not easy. Bryan is an expert here on this. Elizabeth is an expert. Education is the answer. Expose them to the ideas. If they don't know the ideas out there, they're not going to be able to act on it. You know, it has to be sold. There's wonderful courses, you know, I just got that, which I've found wonderful courses. But if you're in an organization, you're nearest voice, you're the voice of power there. You know, so it's really up to you as members of the members of the organization to speak and be heard. Thank you.
I think there's two different aspects of this. One is it's a question internal to the organization, in which case that has been by leadership to try to get the thought process out of them, which is how do we make some investments to support. And so that is wonderful opportunities for groups like Francesco to get the buy-in on this. You know, this cannot be done. I've worked in universities before. It can't be done by the CIO. The trust needs to have to buy off on this direction. From the outside, when you actually designers, you have to remember your boss. They should know. If they are doing what she wants, go find someone else. And there's increasingly more and more groups that are willing to have these kind of conversations. It's easy for them, and consultants, investment managers will try to give you the old line, which is, oh, it can't be done. You're going to do that because it's easier for them not to. But from your perspective, again, this is a priority to our organization, and therefore, this is what we expect. And it's the same thing to Alice's question. The groups you're working with, establishing expectations. This is what we expect from you, and if you will not submit, you will have something else who does. It requires programs. You know, socially responsible investing is not easy. It requires the ability to spend more time if you want to buy something. But as faith-based organizations, mission-based organizations, should never be what we're going to do.
Really briefly on Rachel's question, part of what that brought to mind for me is, you know, the principles of Catholic social thought. One of the ideas around that is subsidiarity, which has many interpretations. One is decentralizing decision making, and I think many of us are recognizing our institutions are not fit for purpose, and actually in our kind of our global capital market, there's more and more concentration of power and wealth with fewer and fewer asset management firms. This is something you have to be very attuned to is institutional design, organizational design, and I think you can take a cue from things like participatory forms of investing. So I know some faith groups who are literally bringing community stakeholders to the table, putting them on decision-making committees, asking them to co-design how a transaction can be structured. So this is a shift from a power over mentality to a power with mentality, being mindful of the distribution of burden and work that entails. But I really know groups who are doing this. There is a group called RSS Social Finance that does what they call turn-setting meetings. They bring the intended investees to the table with investors, and they set the terms of the investment together. What do you need? What can you afford? Let's figure this out. That is a radical shift from how we typically concentrated risk in certain places and concentrated benefit in other places. So we can get creative about bringing in a principle of participation, making risk and return more equitable and distributed.
Thank you. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So we'll collate the choices yours.
Hi, my name is Esther. Following that mentioned, I have 2 social enterprise in the New York City. One of the issues that I'm facing when I'm deciding investments, my goals they always have target to me. Investors are like, oh, is it without really walking for. How would you advise us to present to target for this big much less to put our product in there? And how do we create the data of the social impact investments? And then at the day, I have a nonprofit and I always see which one is better to set up. And if you have how can we get access to these data and to set up any program that you have also beneficial.
Hi, my name is Vicky. I'm in Pakistan. I'm representing Sharaka Partnership for Development. And my question is to you. I also have a master's in economics, right? And so, what advice would you give to those of us who are similarly trying to unlearn these, sort of narrow things? Could you recommend any resources that you feel like what your experience is like in a bit more detail? Thank you.
2 very big questions. So, Bryan, would you like to start?
Yes, no, and I will be back with that conversation. It's, when your organization needs, a little bit about everything, but everyone else that works for you is fine. And her conclusion was actually Sarah Smith, who's a merchant partnership. I'm not sure she's going to have the answer either, but she knows organizations that can. And so again, as we go through this, if you're dealing with 65 organizations and everyone's got different approaches and something like solar issues and wind issues, it's impossible. I don't want to put ourselves up in that regards, but these are the sorts of things where I think the big takeaway from this is use organizations, reach out to organizations such as us. We have no answers, but we are very good at making networks and Mark said to help a group organization along and help them partners that can recognize that our role for partnership is capital for we do not do experts in retail or something like so. Afterwards, it's exchange some cards and we'll get you a bunch.
Unlearning classical economics. Be careful if you're talking about this today. But first thing is, let's exchange info. You can join one of our cohorts. there are a number of emergent sort of new frameworks and theories that I think can really be in rich dialogue with financing. So a lot of these frameworks point to this question of how do you live within, how do you guarantee a basic threshold of well-being while also living in healthy social and ecological limits? Because a big part of the problem is we have not accurately internalized the environmental and social costs of our economic decisions. And so donut economics is a common framework. The framework economics based in the UK has written extensively and developed very practical frameworks, which by the way, they just released a toolkit for how you build a business according to donut economics principles. It's not just in the policy sphere. I think there's also a lot to be said about how traditional economics has privileged efficiency and efficient markets, and then left equity to everyone else, to others, right? And if our goal is to create a more just and equitable world, as is enshrined within the principles and tenets of our faith tradition, we have to challenge that underlying assertion that efficiency is the primary focus of this discipline. And that requires probably unwinding a lot of our training in econometrics, which makes utility the thing that you are always maximizing for, right? Or says price is the primary way that we signal value. Value is multifaceted. There is relational value, spiritual value in all of the examples you're hearing today. So lots of reading. Another book I just finished recently is called The Value of a Whale. If you remember, the World Bank came out with a report that assigned a dollar value to a whale, right? And this is part of an expression that our culture desires, it's a big desire in some ways to quantify risks, returns, costs, benefits, etc. But it's dangerous, right? To say that something like a whale is only as valuable as a dollar sort of figure. So we have to, I think, be thoughtful about some of these underlying issues. Beautiful, thank you. I can also recommend Impact by the Ron Cohen, who is often seen as the grandfather of impact investing. He does a lot of work in the UK, so that's another one to check out. Great example, thank you. I am afraid we've come to the end of the Q&A, which is always that because we always want more time. But on your business cards and on the screen, you'll see the QR code. Please do use that to get the contact details for our speakers here and their organisation. And that's how you can reach out to them if you don't have a chance to speak to them after the event. But as a moderator, I am very lucky because I get to ask the last question, which is a great job. So in a sentence or less, or, a couple of sentences, Marilyn will roll her eyes at me, which is like, it's impossible. What is one thing, finance related or otherwise, that we should remember in our work to achieve gender equality? So that's for all of you. One thing for us to take away today.
I would say the change comes from within, and that we really want to work for transformative change within them. Whatever will give them the self-esteem, the recognition of their dignity, the father they have, and that empowers them to create change from within the situation. So it's not really about scale. It's about personal transformation.
One of my mentors, Sister Mamali Burrick, she's from Ghana, she often says, be careful, Elizabeth, because this new development paradigm is the same old stuff in new ground papers. And I think to me what that says is we need more women, not just to get in the game, to change financing, but to change the rules. Like literally change the underlying logic that guides a lot of our financial decision making. And so I think having the courage to redesign, rethink in very bold and beautiful ways how we shift from an economy that's become very financialized to an economy that really centers the dignity of each woman and girl and that works for us, that serves them.
I would say find ways that you can empower business. From the standpoint of we need to be working with organizations that are being led by women. We need to be making specific investment allocations in the world. I mentioned earlier, 90% of the world is involved, at least in the US as well, is managed by white guys. Specifically, a lot of your ways to hire female-led organizations and white organizations. And let they will succeed. And that's they just are fighting against the wind from the standpoint. They don't have the same opportunity sets because of people in a specific gender. So don't go and try to make the rules for them. Just empower them, let them do what we want to do.
Thank you. I would say be ambitious for them and with them. I would never imagine that a woman in Ethiopia would be satisfied with the stove. There is so much more that she is entitled to, that she should have access to. So I would say build on all of our budget. And never imagine for a minute that until she has absolute parity with everyone else, that it is green for her. It's never good enough until she gets it.
I'd like to end with a quote from a person who works at the UN, whose name is Jan Eliasson, and he said, "Without passion, nothing happens. But without compassion, the wrong things happen."
Thank you to our wonderful. So it's now time for me to close this event, but thank you so much for being so attentive and respectful and engaged. We are so glad that you joined us. And if you have any questions, please